Thank you for joining us on ROXTalks, Children's Services of Roxbury platform for engaging dialogues with CSR's President and CEO, Sandra McCroom, to discuss social issues that would advance CSR and the community it serves. I am Delinda Eiffel Prasad, CSR's Director of Marketing and Communications. Now, CSR is ran by and for people of color, from our board to our CEO and senior leadership to our multilingual, multiracial staff. CSR reflects the communities we serve. Racial equity and justice are at the heart of CSR's mission and places CSR, where we place families rather, at the center of our system. Today's Rocks Talks is how do we dismantle systemic racism? A discussion with Sandra McCroom on strengthening families and building communities. Now, initially, when we extended this invitation, it was intended for a half an hour, but we understand how there's so much that could be said to this topic. So we just want you to
Absolutely.
know from the beginning that we are extending the half an hour to a little bit more time after. There'll be an encore, so please stick with us for the half an hour, but if you can stay thereafter, we encourage you to do so. Sandra is here today to help establish Rockstocks as a brave space where we can all safely and respectfully engage in what may sometimes be uncomfortable conversations. Sandra often says that she feels the weight of racism daily. She uses this heaviness of that burden to motivate and fuel her passion working for racial and social justice. Sandra was raised by civil rights activist parents, her father, a civil rights attorney, and her mother, a registered nurse. They raised her to always be proud and prayerful and to live a life of service. Her lifelong commitment to improving the lives of others and her community is evident from her 3 years of serving in Thailand as a United States Peace Corps volunteer to working on criminal justice reforms as Undersecretary of Criminal Justice in the Patrick administration to her current position, we all know her, to hold as the President and Chief Executive Officer of Children's Services of Roxbury. Just a few weeks ago, Sandra received the prestigious Board Chairs Award from the Massachusetts Providers Council for her leadership as Executive Vice Chair of the board and as co-chair of the Race, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, a position she's held for 4 years. Please join me in welcoming Sandra to CSR's inaugural Rocks Talks event. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you, Delinda. I am so excited for this. I hope everybody watching is as excited. And Delinda, thank you and the rest of the CSR team for putting all of this together. Really, thank you.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. You
Sure.
addressed CSR staff in an all staff assembly earlier this year in February, and your message was a year without fear. And this is before the COVID-19 pandemic impacted all of our lives. How has CSR embodied a year without fear, not only for staff, but also for the families that we serve?
Well, yeah, thank you for the question. So when we put together that all staff assembly, I really wanted to have a theme that encouraged and motivated folks to really face not just this year, but life without fear. Now, that is not to say you cannot be afraid of things. And in fact, there is a reason we have that emotion, fear as an emotion, but it cannot and should not dominate our lives. And when we look at the families that we serve, um, they are fearless. Their resiliency, their stick to itiveness to be able to excel and work for a better position for their families, for their children, is inspiring and should be inspiring to all of us, and that we should face challenges head on without fear, knowing that if we stand fast in our beliefs, stand fast in our um, commitment to making the lives of the families that we serve better and the lives of the people in our community better, there is nothing to fear. There is righteousness in that. There is promise in that. And there is nothing to be afraid in that. And I can say that even as the pandemic took hold of this country, um, I could not be prouder of the entire CSR staff because you all faced many, many challenges with poise and grace and without fear. Um, and we were all there really to support each other. So I thought that concept um, was important and is applicable not just to 2020, which has been crazy, right? But it is also applicable to how we face and how we should face our lives.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Now, 2020 has been an unprecedented year, to say the least, not only because of the impact of COVID, but also the dynamic across the nation in the exposing racial injustices, particularly with the murder of George Floyd. As one of the state's largest minority run nonprofits, what role does CSR have in the community with the fight against social and racial injustices?
It's an excellent question, and I've talked to you and the rest of the senior team often about um, capturing this moment in a way where, as a Black organization, as a minority-run organization, we have a place and a purpose in this moment in time to help facilitate conversations like we're having today, to help give voice to the voiceless, to have a responsibility to make sure that we are not inadvertently part of the problem, but part of the solution. But an equally important message that I want the community to know, and anybody who does this work, who works to improve the lot of others, um, is to know that the protests that were and are happening in the street, the question that a lot of people have of what can I do, I want folks to know that CSR has and will continue to do the work that other people are trying to figure out, well, how do I help? And what I mean by that is we have always and will continue to amplify the resilience of the families that we serve. The people that we serve, while they are in sometimes unspeakable circumstances, their families have experienced trauma that most of us couldn't bear. They are facing challenges that really are could seem insurmountable, and yet they do it with dignity and grace, and we honor that. And that is the work. That is absolutely the work. Now, is that to say we don't have more to do? Absolutely not. And I think, to not only Children's Services Roxbury staff, but again, anybody who is in the serving field, know that you are empowered, that you are already doing the work. The other thing I want to say about Mr. Floyd's death, those 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I think every day we should pause for that amount of time. One, to realize how horrific the murder of Mr. Floyd was in front of us. But we, as people of color in this country, have been fighting this fight for our entire existence, from August of 1619, when we were brought to this country. Um, this idea, and I can't believe people grapple with the idea of institutional racism and how that has played itself out in this country. I just am hopeful that people are continuing to wake up to the fact that before there was a George Floyd, there was a Trayvon Martin, there was a Emmett Till, there was a Medgar Evers. there were systematic ways in which this country sadly treated us, and in fact wrote in the Constitution that people of color were considered three-fourths of a human. And I just think that we have to keep talking about the history leading up to a George Floyd, you know. So uh, the answer to that question is two-pronged. One, we have to continue to do the work. We have to be critical thinkers about how we as an agency and we as a community don't inadvertently buy into the systems and not allow the systems to continue to exist, and that we're not inadvertently adding to that. And second, to recognize that George Floyd is one of hundreds of thousands of disenfranchised people in this country who have paid with their lives for us to try to really realize the fullness of what this country should be to all people and not to just some people.
Very true, indeed. Before we move on, I just want to encourage everyone. You don't have to wait till the end to comment or to leave a question. You can do so in the Q&A or in the chat. I know we're still working on getting Facebook Live going. It says preparing. So once that goes, if you decide to join on Facebook Live, if you know anyone who is, they will be also able to comment there as well. So in the months leading up to the 2020 presidential election, Sandra, you were very instrumental in sending out communications that stressed the importance of voting. Why was it important? You in fact shared a pretty detailed timeline that spoke to the history of the rights to vote. Why was it important for you to truly send this message?
Well, you had mentioned earlier, and thank you. This is the timeline that you're referring to. But you had mentioned earlier the fact that I was raised by civil rights activist parents, and that is crucial to why and how this timeline came about, why and how it is so important to me. And particularly in the political discourse that's happening in this country. And I found it so important for people to understand the history of voting in this country, because I don't think people fully realize the struggle and fight that continues to this day around access to voting and why voting is so powerful. And there are some cynics who believe, well, does my vote really count? But I feel like, in the top of that timeline, I put vote like your life. I'm sorry, vote like your ancestors died for it, because they did. And I mean that from, not just African Americans in this country, but Native Americans, Asian Americans, even white men did not have the right to vote when this thing called the United States was created. And that timeline, if anybody has ever had a question about whether or not we live in a country that is continuing to struggle so that all men are created equal, that we all experience the promise of this country, when there are systems that are built for us not to enjoy those freedoms, that those freedoms came at the hands and the blood of people who died for us, it is explicitly displayed in that timeline. And I felt like, many of us, myself included, like we don't revisit history class and to understand the suffrage, if you will, right, of people who died for us to have the right to vote. And that has been on full display in terms of the amount of voter suppression that is happening even as we speak. People trying to take away our right to vote and decide on our own destiny via the people that we put in elected office. So it is vitally important to me. And I really hope that that timeline was helpful to people and educational because it tells its own story.
It does indeed. I remember receiving it and saying to myself, like, I didn't even know half of this information. So it definitely was well received. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now, CSR is preparing to purchase the Roxbury headquarters at 504 and 520 Dudley Street by the end of this year. What is it? Why is this rather an important step for the agency and for the communities that CSR serves?
Um, well, I've been CEO here for 5 years now. And the agency's been around for almost 50 years. And the opportunity presented itself to purchase the building, right? We're talking about 48,000 square feet. We were continually trying to find space for staff. So on one hand, it's very practical for how we use the building, of course, pre-COVID. But coming back, I work for the state, but coming back to the community and witnessing firsthand the gentrification that is happening in Roxbury, I know that it is vitally important to put a stake in the ground for an agency like Children's Services of Roxbury, that we have always been in this community. Now, we do serve the entire state. We have offices in Northampton, we have offices in Tewksbury and Worcester, but our home base is right here in Roxbury and always has been. I think every office this agency has ever occupied has been within a 1 mile radius of the building that we're in now. And for us to own this building is a statement to the people that we serve. It is a statement to our staff. It is a statement to the community that we are not only worthy, but we deserve a place to call home, a permanent home. And I want to make this block, literally the buildings we're talking about buying, takes up an entire city block, and that this block shall not be moved, right? In the midst of the things that are changing around us, and that the people in this community can always call Children's Services of Roxbury home. And we hope to rehab it, to create a community that can help weigh in on what this building will serve as for them, what it will look like, what it will feel like, and how it will best serve this community for generations to come. And the people, both who work here and who live and get served by our agency, deserve that and so much more. I feel very passionately about that.
Definitely a major move. So congratulations on that.
Well, it is not my congratulations. It is for me a statement of worthiness for the community, and not to shy away from owning our own greatness. And if a building is a symbol of that, it is well deserved by the community.
Indeed. CSR recently launched the Together We Rise campaign. What do you hope to accomplish with the Together We Rise campaign?
So this is 2 years in the making, and I'm so proud that you and so many other folks on the staff have helped to bring this to fruition. 2 years in the making, because we're working with some friends and collaborators from the 513 Project, and we named it, this campaign is to do a number of things. One is to engage the community, both through social media um, and through our website in a much more intimate way to increase the base with which we can have communication, both for things like ROXTalks and conversations like this. But to be honest with you, also for a donor base. I mean, I'm not going to shy away from, and in fact, we shouldn't shy away from the fact that to run a large organization, we have 400 staff people. We serve over 6,000 children and their families a year. We're in 4 cities, like I mentioned, and I wanted folks from across the state and across the nation to understand that for 50 years, this agency has not only survived, but thrived. And we've always kept our head down. We've always been humble, just doing the work. And so this campaign, Together We Rise, is a symbol of, you know, what we do every day. People should know about it and they should support it. And, you know, we make no apologies for that. And it is far past due for, you know, CSR to get the recognition it deserves from our founders, Reverend and Mrs. Richardson, to my predecessor, Pam Ogletree, and all the hundreds of people we have employed and the thousands upon thousands of people we serve. So Together We Rise is really a multiple fold campaign to increase exposure and to have a much more intimate conversation with people of like minds and who can help us further our mission.
Indeed. And the title of the campaign speaks for itself, Together We Rise. So definitely.
Yeah, a lot, you know, I'm shocked. I'm always shocked when I talk to people and they're not familiar with Maya Angelou's poem, Still We Rise. And so it is a play on those words and is, I think, a clear description, really even based on that poem of, you know, what we're trying to do.
Indeed. So at this point, Sandra, we're going to hear from those joining us. Our Director of System and Analytics, Amos, is going to support us with unmuting panelists so we can hear participants rather, so we can hear from them. And it looks like we have a question from Giselle. So Amos, would you please unmute Giselle so she can read her question for us?
Hi.
Hi, Giselle. How are you?
Hi. How are you? So I just wanted to ask that we know that we, as we being a nonprofit agency that work directly with disadvantaged communities, how the races topic may affect the services to those communities in need.
So if I understand your question, Ms. Giselle, is how does racism affect the communities that we serve in the communities in need? Is that correct?
Yes, and the services that directly are provide as a big agency to those communities.
Well, thank you so much for the question. And I think that, again, I mentioned before, we have a responsibility to not ignore, one being a agency of color, to not ignore, to navigate and help interpret along with and in partnership with the communities that we serve. Disenfranchised people live under the thumb of racism every single day. And like Delinda mentioned in my introduction, that motivates me because I know what that added layer feels like, you know, and it is our responsibility. It affects us in how we navigate and how we help families navigate not only the very practical challenges of life around housing, the inequities around healthcare, the inequities around, the economic and financial gap that exists. But it also, if we don't know how racism impacts us, we may not know why or how we make some decisions that we make. And I think that our own education, our own self-awareness of racism and how it influences every aspect of our lives helps families to know it's not all their fault. The challenges that they're facing are not all self-imposed. Now, do we make poor decisions? All of us do. But we are making these decisions under the weight of racism, under the weight of institutions that were not originally built for us. And in fact, some institutions that were built to restrain us. And I think as a nonprofit, we face those challenges all the time. Even I'll say this and then I'll stop talking. But as
Thank you.
I struggle sometimes with the question of whether or not, as a nonprofit, are we inadvertently continuing the perpetuation of those systems on the families we serve simply by accepting contracts as they're written, accepting contracts that don't fully pay for all the services that we deliver and that our families deserve, and balancing that. So thank you, Giselle. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
We don't have any more questions yet, but Sandra, just to add to it, I would like you to speak a little bit about how, as a human services agency, how do we keep the momentum, right? Like, how do we keep running this marathon and not only combating racial and even socioeconomic injustices, but also just really being there to make sure that these things don't totally interfere with the work that we do for the families and children that we serve?
Well, it's a good question. And a couple of years ago, we started something called the Peace of Mind campaign. And we even restructured our mission vision around helping people to have some level of peace of mind. And I think that in these very, very turbulent times, the idea of what that means to have peace of mind can feel ambiguous. And I think at every turn, we are trying to give people enough time and space to collect their thoughts, to figure out my next step forward, right? So I don't want to really talk politics because I will go off on a tangent, but I can tell you, I think this spontaneous celebration in the streets across this country when we knew the Biden-Harris ticket was going to win was a collective sigh of relief. And I equate that to every day when we take a family who is homeless and put them in housing for the first time in how many weeks or months. Just that moment, that first night where they're not worried about whether their kids are going to be cold or hungry. Do they have challenges to face? Yes. But that collective family sigh of relief, that peace of mind that tonight I'm going to be safe, my kids are going to be safe, are all, we have to strive, and the motivation comes from finding and building on one of those moments after another to continue to build up the strength and the fortitude of the families we serve, the agency, our communities. And I don't know how you lose motivation because the minute you get that housing, you got to celebrate that moment, but then you got to start working on permanent housing. Then you have to start working on jobs. Then it keeps coming, but we have to keep finding and celebrating those moments where we can have a little bit of peace of mind, where we can have a little bit of that collective sigh of relief. And I think for me, that continual push for those moments is the motivation. And we have to keep it up. People are hurting too much for us not to do the work we're doing.
Very true indeed. Earlier we were having some technical difficulties with Facebook Live, but I just want to check in with Harry Harding, our Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, who's overseeing Facebook Live. Harry, are there any questions on Facebook Live before we move forward on the webinar?
Right now, we don't have any additional questions on Facebook Live.
Okay, thank you so much.
No worries.
We have a question from Dr. Ed Wang. Amos, would you mind unmuting him, please, so we can hear his question?
Hello, CSR team and Sandra. My question is, what would you recommend as the first practical step to reduce racism? There's a lot of things happening in terms of being time sensitive. What can we do? And what role will CSR play in this, let's say, practical step?
Well, Dr. Wang, it's good to hear your voice. I hope you and your family are well. And thank you for the question. I just want to continue to remind over and over, I can't say it enough, that all of this feels overwhelming. This you know, centuries old battle against racism and racial bias. And so for my own sanity, I have to say, and I have to remind and encourage, particularly our employees and the families we serve. I keep coming back to that you are already chipping away at it by empowering and lifting up the families we serve. We are already doing that work. It cannot be overstated. That said, I think the role CSR can continue to play is to be a towering example of excellence, of Black excellence in this community, of excellence of communities of color, to be inclusive in conversations like we are having. I think that it is terribly important for us to, Delinda talked about creating safe and brave spaces. These conversations are not easy. I don't propose to have all the solutions. What I propose to do is to lead an agency that allows for these conversations to move forward, and through our actions of service to the community, to start changing the impressions and the trajectories of, the impressions of communities of color and the trajectory of the lives of the people we serve. We have a vital role, and I try to narrow my thinking with respect to the role and responsibility of our agency, because there are many more. My previous job working with the state was for the, I was the Undersecretary for Criminal Justice, and we worked on criminal justice reform. And we can weigh in on that. I spent a big chunk of my career working on it. But the scope of what we do here at CSR and our role, I want to be intentional and intensify what we do in our lane, if you will, while still giving room to address criminal justice reform and the fact that we have men and women in our agency, children in our agency, who have parents that are incarcerated, and how do we help them with the trauma of that? We have, fathers and mothers who are coming back to their families from incarceration, and how do we help them reunite? Now, it's not to say we won't weigh in on these bigger policy issues, but it all can be way too overwhelming. And I think we have clear roles that we can play to contribute and have been contributing to that question. And we can do it just like you said, together we rise.
Together we rise, indeed. Now we want to be mindful of everyone's time. ROXTalks was scheduled for a half an hour, but as I mentioned, we do have an encore presentation. So if you can stay on, we encourage you to do so for another 15 minutes or so. I know we have another question that we can get to, but for those of you who have to part ways at this time, we just want you to know that ROXTalks will occur again on Tuesday, December 1st. With Sandra and a very special guest. So make sure you look out for the invitation to that and save the date to plan to join us. We will continue with the conversation, but thank you for anyone who has to hop off. We completely understand. We currently have a question from Ricardo. Amos, if you can please unmic him to read his question, that would be great.
There he goes.
Hey, Sandra. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you, Ricardo?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well. My question was, I know as you said, you've been the leader of CSR for about 5 years now. You have a tremendous amount of leadership experience. Leading a minority-led organization like ours, how do you see yourself creating a space for employees and partners to be able to take the lead on various opportunities that present themselves for individuals to represent our community, to be the voice of the community? Because I know that oftentimes we always say the community has so much to say and we have a duty to represent them, right? When we sit at these various tables. How do you do that as the leader? How do you create these opportunities for us to represent our community in a rightful way?
Well, thank you for the question. And I'm gonna put you on the spot too and ask you to comment on the work that you and Harry are doing with YPP. But let me just say, about 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, I created something here at CSR called the Capacity Building Team. And that team includes all of the senior staff and then key staff members that can help us strategize. It's sort of like an internal think tank about how to build capacity throughout the agency. And that has already borne fruit. So some of it is mechanical, the logistics of having an infrastructure within an agency to hold up the agency, finances, HR, contracting, all of those sort of the nuts and bolts of what it takes to run a large multifaceted organization. The other part of that is the development of new positions, assessing where and how are we, where we can elevate and promote people from within. It means cleaning up job descriptions and re-identifying, much to the chagrin of a lot of our senior staff. Every time they say, hey, I want to give so-and-so a promotion, or we got to get this job filled, I'm pushing back and saying, okay, what is that title? What is the job responsibilities? And how do we add that to career ladders throughout the agency? And that is a long, ongoing process. The other thing is I have begun to tap people, Harry Harding being one of them, Yvonne, others throughout the agency, to take leadership roles on boards. I think about others. I can't be at every meeting, and I want people to be empowered to go to these meetings, to represent who we are professionally, represent the voice of our community. And we are continuing to expand that so that people within our agency have the opportunity to go out and sit on boards and commissions and partnership groups and agencies to represent who we are. So it is a priority for us. And I tell even senior staff all the time, one day you'll be the CEO, and how will you handle this situation? I'm bringing people into meetings that maybe they wouldn't necessarily have access to. I've created a team of folks who, it's not in their job description to buy a building, but they're at meetings about how to buy a building, right? How to negotiate, how to find a bank, what documents you need for it. I I know nothing about a environmental survey, but we had to get one, and we all learned together. What does that mean? How do we interact with state government, city government on different levels to achieve our goals? So at every turn, the older I get, the more I know. Um, Giving opportunities and teaching what I know through my experiences only makes me better. And so in some ways I feel very selfish in trying to expose people and grow their own leadership.
Thank you, Sandra.
Ricardo, can you talk a little bit about YPP and why that's so important? Amos, you have him on mute. Yeah.
No, I'm all set. Thank you, Sandra. So I think it is a privilege for me to be the new director of YPP, which is Youth and Police in Partnership. It's our flagship premier youth development program at CSR, which comes with its own set of expectation and standard, right? We want to represent a standard of excellency and pride for both the community that we serve, but also for our organization. Youth and Police in Partnership has a very long and extensive relationship with BPD that spans over 25 plus years. I think that right now we are uniquely positioned as what's going on throughout the nation with whether it's police relations with the community, police brutality, the responsibility of community folks, leaders in our communities, to really be able to have these dialogues, have these conversations, well, more importantly, to give young people an opportunity to be a part of those conversations. We deeply believe, as part of our program, that young people have something to say. It is often a byproduct of them not knowing how to voice their opinion, but they truly have their own experiences as they navigate these various interactions, whether it's a young male, 15 to 18, how he deals with the police, a young female, things of that nature. Again, YPP, we are trying to have the type of dialogues with policymakers. One of the great things that we have in the pipeline is we're actually going to be a part, young people are going to be a part of a youth council where they're going to be able to learn more about policy making and what is it does, how do the policies that govern our communities, how do they truly affect us as individuals? And what can you do as a young person, as a young leader in the making? What can you do about it, right? So there's so many different things going on in our communities where we really want to equip our young people to not only be a part of the conversation, but be a part of the change that they want to see. And those things came about, just like you said, with the nuts and bolts, which were we've updated our curriculum. We've revamped some of our partnerships. We've rekindled some of those relationships, but also we're trying to push the envelope as to who else can we partner with, like-minded folks, to be able to, again, look for creative ways for us to do more for our community, not just for the people that we serve, but for the community at large. And I think that unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we've been on Zoom, but it's also created a number of opportunities for us to be able to have a longer outreach when it comes to other groups that we could partner with, other organizations, and just other communities that we could reach out to. So I could speak about YPP for days because that's how exciting the work is. But I think that right now it is a time for us to really focus in on what's going on in our community and really work with the young people to deliver a great product, which would in turn make them great leaders.
Thank you. And thank you for that work on such an important piece to this conversation. I appreciate you letting me put you on the spot.
No, no problem.
Thank you, Ricardo. Now we are going to open it up more to have our attendees weigh in on this question. What should be the top priority for building up families and strengthening our community? What should be the top priority for building up families and strengthening our community? Sandra, you spoke to this for the past 45 minutes or so. So if anyone wants to weigh in on that, we can unmute your mic and have you state your piece. But to get things going, since we are throwing people on the spot, let's hear from Harry Harding.
He's a good person to throw under the butt. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah. You guys can't see the tire marks on my chest right now, but they're there. Can you repeat the question, Delinda?
really?
No, well, I'm multitasking.
I
I'm
know.
monitoring. You know what I mean?
I know. We got you working. It's all good. Go ahead, Linda.
What should be the top priority for building up families and strengthening our community?
Oh man, there's so many layers to that question. I think I can answer a number of ways. The first thing that came to my mind is thinking about what we did a couple years ago or a few years ago when we started going through this whole, Sandra initiated this entire rebranding process of the agency. And, she talked earlier about the Peace of Mind campaign. But one of the things that we did during that I thought was so important was we really looked at the mission statement and really looked at the language. And if those of you remember, part of the language previously was that the word empowerment, that we empower families and children. And while in theory and in technicality, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that statement, one of the reasons why we did change it is because there's an insinuation there that we give power to folks, when the actuality is they already have the power. Our stance and our work and our service in this organization and in this field is about helping people recognize their power and then doing what we can to help them to enact that power. And I think that ultimately is what we continue to do through our various programmings, through behavioral health, through housing, through our daycare, through our foster care program, through our youth development, all the different things that we do as an agency, all 20 odd programs are designed to, change the conditions for the better of the families and the children that they're being served. And I think so as long as we continue in that vein, as long as we are, as long as the staff that have that are dedicated to this work continue to go into homes and go into communities, now virtually go into homes, I suppose. But now that we continue to do this work in a way in which we are honoring and respecting the resource and the strength that the families already own, and then just helping them do and helping them use that and helping them build upon that strength, that will have lasting impact, lasting productivity, and ultimately it will tackle many of the different things, including racism, and including again a number of different ailments that plague our community. So I think that that's a relatively broad answer, but that I actually believe that that's at the core of it, is making sure our families know that their power rests within them, and we're going to help them exploit that power and use it for the betterment of their families and those around them.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Michelle Crawford, I saw your comment in the chat. Hopefully you don't mind blessing us with your voice to comment and elaborate a little bit more.
Of course. It's so nice to see you all too. So I have to say, I know that I am like a happy bunny when it comes to some of our campaigns and just support that CSR provides for us. But I do have to say, one of my most prideful moments of being a part of CSR was when Michelle Brathwaite was introduced to us to support us around our financial analysts and financial planning. For me, it spoke volumes around how leadership felt about, staff's needs, not knowing that some of us were frontliners, some of us were trying to take care of our own families, as well as the families that we're servicing. And there was just something about the importance in that came through when Michelle was meeting with us. And I don't have, I'll have to expand on this a little bit more at another time, but what's been on my heart a lot, just hearing about our own staff in BHD, is professional self-care. And what does that mean? And how does an agency and department actually support professional self-care? You know, it's when people say to you, make sure you take care of yourself. Sometimes people are going through such a difficult time. It's almost like you are lingering on their words, trying to catch each word, like, tell me how, right? And we do that. I know that's like a greeting or a goodbye, like, take care of yourself. But for us, particularly, again, providing human services to families, people's lives, it's like, what does that really mean? And how do agencies really support the practice of self-care?
Very true indeed, Michelle. Thank you for that. We're going to take one last comment. It looks like Gladys Rivera raised her hand. Gladys, would you like to say something?
Hello.
We can hear you. Hi,
Hi,
Gladys.
Gladys.
Hi, Sandra. So I don't know if this is it's a good idea or not, but this is my idea. I don't know. It just, I have a dream to see a huge table with like a banquet, because I think food bring people together. Doesn't matter what race, what culture they are. I would love for CSR to look for a place that we all can cook and bring our place. And I would like to try something that Sandra is going to make. You know, and that we can share our strengths and hope for the future. Because when you are eating, doesn't matter what race you are, you know, and I think that strengthens our community, because we can, even with our family, bring the families when we can, you know, maybe in the next year or something, to have a big gathering and we all bring something to share. Dr. Juan, I know he likes to cook. I know, I know he likes to cook, and other people that I know. So, and we, through that food, we're going to know more about others. And that is my dream.
What a lovely dream, Gladys. There's an old saying that the way to the heart is through the stomach. So I don't see any issues with that, indeed. That is all the time we have for today for ROXTalks. We will have another ROXTalks, as I mentioned earlier, on Tuesday, December 1st. So please plan to join us and save the date for that. Thank you to my colleagues, Amos, Michael, and Harry, for your support with this production, and to everyone joining and listening in. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And also, please head over to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and like our page at CS Roxbury. Sandra, thank you for this conversation. Any final words?
Yeah, if I could just, I'm just going to read an excerpt of the basis of our Together We Rise, which is an excerpt of Maya Angelou's poem. And it says, out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. From the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear the tide. Leaving behind the nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
Beautiful way to end. Together we rise, right?
Together, together.
Indeed. Thank you all for watching. Take care and stay safe.
Stay tuned. We'll be back with more, right?
Indeed. Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Delinda, for your exceptional hosting. Really.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care.